There's a great myth in our culture. It's one that we all grew up with, and that was that joyous, wonderful relationships would just happen. We've learned that that isn't true. All we have to do is look at the astounding divorce rate of well over 50% to see that there's an abysmal rate of failure in marriages. And in fact, we know that the remaining intact marriages that didn't divorce are not necessarily happy places. So what happened? Whose fault was it? Why did this all occur? Well, by a show of hands, let me ask you a few questions. When you went to school, how many of you took a class in English? History. How about math? Anyone take math? How many of you took courses in intimacy and relationship? No one? How many of you would like to have more intimacy and passion in your lives? All of you. The problem is we never received any training in the art of intimacy and the pleasure of passion. The cornerstone of a happy life, nobody ever taught us how. Isn't that bizarre? We were told probably by our parents that we should be happy. They were our only model for happiness, and nobody ever taught them how to be happy. So we were left with this myth. We were just going to be happy. We were never trained. So you see, it isn't our fault. The tendency is to look into ourselves and think that we're failures, that this pain or conflict in our lives is something we've done wrong. But we're all in the same boat. So why do we lack for intimacy in our lives? Well, we look for happiness in the wrong places. I call it, I'll be happy when. Starts like this. We're teenagers, and we say, I'll be happy when I get married. Well, we get married, doesn't quite happen. It's, I'll be happy when I have children. And we've got the children, and, well, I'll be happy when I can get that dream house. And we get the dream house. Well, then we need to furnish it. I'll be happy when the kids are out of the house and off to school. I have my freedom. Still, we're not quite happy. Eventually, we may say, I'll be happy when we retire. What's happened here? An entire lifetime has passed, and happiness was just an illusion. We never grabbed that moment of happiness. Why? Because we're looking for happiness in the wrong places. We're basing it upon the next milestone of our lives, the next achievement, the next thing external to us. That never gives us happiness. We need to learn to look inside ourselves for happiness and intimacy in our relationship with ourselves and with others to really find happiness. Let's just take a look at what happens when we decide to get married. Two people who hardly know one another yet on a deeply emotional level already turn aside from one another. Their plans go to the wedding, the bachelor party, the bridal shower, the invitation, the seating list. These people who really need to be focusing on one another, sharing their visions for happiness, what their problems are going to be, what they need to work through, their fears, their dreams. And what are they doing? They are externalizing on the future events and those plans outside of themselves. Then they turn around many years later and say, what happened? What happened is they didn't focus inward for their happiness. Do you remember what it was like when you first met your lover, the very first time you fell in love? Do you remember that experience of sitting there perhaps for hours? You listened to every word. You caught every nuance. You probably smelled every fragrance in the air. And then at the end of that time, you may have looked at your watch and said, in disbelief, that was 3 hours? How could that be? It felt like 20 minutes. Why was time different? Because you were really there. You were present in the moment. There was so much to learn about each other. We already didn't have the answers. We didn't know what was coming out of their mouths. That's what love is. It's being present and wanting to absorb everything you possibly can about the other. And so what happens? Well, the rules of relationship take us down the wrong path. We fall into a habit of following the same script. we get to know the answers in advance. Two people talking to one another, but they're not listening because they already know what's coming out of the other's mouth. And when you decide what's coming out of your partner's mouth and you're trying to convince them that you're right and they're wrong, you're not listening. If you're not listening, you know what happens? You stop learning. And if you're not listening, there's no more wonder. There's no more enchantment. Passion is out the window. The relationship has begun to decay. I recently viewed an argument between two people, and he was going, well, when you said that, I was thinking this, and she said, I didn't say that. And I wondered, well, who was here? There were the three of us in this room, and they're arguing. They can't even agree upon what was said. Nobody was there. If we're not there, awake and alert and alive and conscious, what do we think is going to happen to our relationships? They're going to have to fall apart. We have to learn to listen to one another. But there's a fear about listening to one another. We're afraid to share the truth. And if we can't share the truth with each other and we sweep it under the rug, the resentment builds and the wall goes up. And it builds and builds until we can't see over it, and the intimacy is gone and the passion is gone. Passion. There is a self-fulfilling prophecy, and that is passion dies. We've all heard it. I was doing a seminar recently. After the seminar, one of the men in the audience came up to me and he said, well, I've been married 15, 16 years. He said, my sex life, what could you expect? It's been 15 years. I said, well, if you believe it, there you go. You see, it doesn't have to be that way. Passion is like tending to a fire in the fireplace. You know, if you don't turn the wood over and stoke it and handle it with care and work on keeping the flames alive, they are going to die. But it needn't be that way. Passion flows from intimacy. And if we keep our relationships intimate and we nourish them and nurture them and awaken to a new way of being, passion can thrive, and it can thrive forever. The problem we encounter in our relationships focuses around the word commitment. We make a commitment to one another, and the commitment is we're going to stay in the relationship. If we're getting married, the commitment is we're going to stay married. And so we commit to the end. We commit to the goal and to the outcome. But we don't commit to the process. And that's the road we go down that turns us all wrong. If we commit to the process, if we commit to the fact that we are going to devote ourselves to flourishing our relationships, to having intimacy thrive, to keeping the flames of passion alive, to sharing the truth. How do we share the truth when we're afraid of the consequences? You know, when two people go to sleep at night and their heads hit the pillow and they have thoughts that they won't share with one another, that's the death knell of a relationship. But we've all experienced it. When I work with a couple and they're afraid to tell one another the truth, I enter into something that I call a truth-telling exercise. Here's how it goes. We agree that for the next 30 minutes, there is no such thing as right or wrong. Doesn't exist. There's no such thing as blame or justification. And furthermore, in the future, they can't refer back to this conversation in any way, in a blaming way. What it permits us to do is to share the truth. If we can't share the truth with one another, what are we doing? Why are we in the relationship? And what do we expect to get out of it? It can't thrive and it can't flourish. So we need to be able to share the truth. We need to be able to develop our own sense of intimacy. There's an expression, you can't get from another what you don't give to yourself. If you don't love yourself, don't expect anyone else to. And if you're not intimate with yourself, no one else will be. Our relationships with other people are always just a mirror of our relationship with ourselves. So to see our relationships really come alive and thrive requires a new way of seeing. It requires awakening and committing to the process, being able to give up issues of right or wrong or blame. There is no such thing as right or wrong. My right is your wrong, and tomorrow it's going to switch. So we have to give up all of those issues and permit ourselves to see in a new way and focus in a new way. Albert Einstein said, The same consciousness that created the problem can never solve that problem. And so what I often have to say to couples I'm working with as they're engaged in the argument is, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? The answer is really astounding, because as they engage in the end of that argument, and I see a relationship or a marriage that is about to end, they still haven't detached from the right or wrong. That is for a debating club, but it's not for a loving relationship. So we need to refocus our commitment to changing ourselves, not our partners, to sharing the truth with one another, to creating visions for our happiness that can thrive, and really putting our energies into creating intimacy and stoking the flames of passion so that they can stay alive and we can all thrive. Thank you.